You're listening to
Catholic Sprouts,
the daily podcast for Catholic kids that strives to plant seeds of faith. Hey there, Sprouts. Today is Thursday, February 13th, 2020. This week on the Catholic Sprouts podcast, we are talking about the sacrament of anointing of the sick. We've already talked about how Jesus Christ instituted the sacrament, what happens when someone receives the sacrament of anointing of the sick, and our first powerful intercessor for people that struggle with horrible pain, Saint Lidwina. Today, we are going to talk about Saint Dymphna. Now, Saint Dymphna is another powerful intercessor, but she particularly likes to intercede for people that are suffering from mental illness. Do you know what a mental illness is? A lot of times, things happen or certain things occur in our brain, or we inherit certain traits from our parents that make us not quite think clearly. It can be a terrible, terrible cross to bear when our brain isn't quite working right. Some people suffer with terrible depression. Some people suffer with terrible anxiety. There are all sorts of different types of mental illness. And although our world has a lot of ways to treat and help people that suffer from these very real illnesses, there are not cures for everything. And just as you can receive the sacrament of anointing the sick for a physical illness, you can also receive it when you suffer from a terrible mental illness. Now, the reason why Saint Dymphna is the patron saint of mental illnesses is because her own father suffered from a terrible mental illness, and she suffered under his hand because of it. So here is a story of Saint Dymphna. So Saint Dymphna was an Irish princess back in the 7th century. At the time, her father, the king, was a pagan, but her mother had converted to Christianity. Saint Dymphna, at a young age, decided that she wanted to give her life entirely to Jesus and to live much as a nun lives, not marrying, but simply loving Jesus with all that she is. Unfortunately, at the age of 14, Saint Dymphna's mother died. Now, Saint Dymphna's mother was beautiful, and so was Saint Dymphna. In fact, they looked remarkably similar. Well, her father loved her mother, and when she died suddenly, he couldn't take it. His mind was corrupted, and he began to do all sorts of irrational things due to a mental illness. The most irrational thing he decided to do, because his mind was not working correctly, was he decided that since his wife was gone, he needed to take a new wife, and that new wife would be his daughter, Dymphna. Now, obviously, this was a horrible, weird thing for him to decide to do, and Saint Dymphna escaped from Ireland with the help of her confessor, a priest. They went to Belgium, and while they were there, they were in hiding and fairly safe. But St. Dymphna saw the needs of those that were mentally ill in Belgium and wanted to open a house to take care of them. So she used some of her father's money to do this. Now, when she did that, her father was able to find her. He went all the way to Belgium, and as soon as he found her, he cut off the head of her priest. And when Saint Dymphna refused to marry her mentally ill father, he killed her too. Saint Dymphna's bones were left there in Belgium. But even shortly after her death, many, many people suffering from mental illness came to her grave and were miraculously healed. Saint Dymphna clearly has a special place for those that suffer from illnesses of the mind. Now, today, Sprouts, my challenge for you is to remember those that suffer from mental illness. A lot of the times when we think of those suffering from illness, we think of those with cancer or those that have gotten into a car accident. But there are a lot of those among us that are silently suffering with mental illness. We don't oftentimes know how to help them, but the best thing we can do is love them and pray for them. So today, through the intercession of Saint Dymphna, pray for all of those suffering from mental illness. That's it for Catholic Sprouts today. We'll be back tomorrow, but until then, continue to grow in your faith and truly sprout into the beautiful creation that God created you to be. Hey there, Sprouts. It is such a joy to serve you with this podcast, but I have a quick favor to ask. Please consider sharing this podcast with someone you know and love that might also enjoy learning about their faith. You can do this by word of mouth, text, or message, but let's get as many young saints listening to this podcast as possible. Thanks for the help.